Hey, Evian. Happy birthday. Today's a special day for you. I'm so excited.
Oh, it is. Thank you so much. Yeah.
It has been, it's been a big day. Not only is it your birthday, but you've been launching your new book. I'm so honored, so honored to have you here. And I'll kick us off just by saying I was thinking about how long we've known each other, and it's been about 3 years. Feels like a lifetime. We've been meeting weekly every Friday. I was just saying Fridays with Evian. And it's been life-changing for me. Great insight and really deep. It has increased in the depth of my work and understanding of the brain. So thank you for that.
It's been a great pleasure. It's been one of the most funnest programs I've ever done. And I was so grateful that you reached out to me to do the program with WhatBox. Your reputation had preceded you. Some of my friends had gone to your seminars where you've spoken to 300 executives about innovation in the brain. And they said, she may contact you. And when you did, I went, wow, this is going to be fun. And it was fantastic. It's just been an amazing journey to do this course with you on the brain and in innovation possibility thinking. It's been kind of, it's at the highest level of integrative thinking. So it's been wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. It's good fun. It's been a great experience, but it's also been a lot of fun. It's been really fun conversations. I think back about the first part of our conversations when we weren't really sure how our work integrated. We just knew we had a passion.
Well, initially I wanted to integrate it into Total Brain, and I was really excited by that. And we got, the CEO at the time wanted some creativity in Total Brain, and then they shifted a little bit to more like mental health. And then we'd already committed to doing this course, and so I just continued, and it was, and I'm so glad we did. It was just fantastic.
Yeah, same here. Yeah. We landed in a place I couldn't have even imagined. And then I know it's for both of us, it was very timely because we started this work before COVID and then here in the world of COVID. And it has felt very timely in the work that I'm doing with executives and leaders. And I know it's been really meaningful for you as you've been writing the book. I've been hearing about this, so I'm excited about your book today. And I just wanted to go through it a little bit. So today you're launching From Knowing to Doing, the brain from knowing to doing. Tell me a little bit about, now I know based on the work that we've done, how important this has been for me and for our work, but I'd love to hear you talk about why this book, why now, why this part of your career?
So, so firstly, thanks again for interviewing me today about this book. It's, on my 70th birthday, I don't normally celebrate or even like to think about birthdays, but this one seemed inevitable. And it's been inevitable for a while to think about it from this lens, whereby, Crystal, when I set up the first standardized and integrative database on the brain, it was to subserve a very simple goal. I'd switched from my science and medical career from the heart to the brain. And when I landed in the brain a long time ago, before it was a fad, and to really do brain science on this scale. And it was intriguing to me how siloed the world is. And it works most of the time. It works beautifully in the heart and in most other areas of medicine, but in the brain, because of the highly interconnected nature of the brain, 85 billion highly interconnected neurons, 100 chemicals sloshing around, but it's all about timing. And yes, there is complexity, but here's the weirdest thing. There are simple organizing principles that drive this incredibly complicated, complex system and brain and body system too. And so I was fascinated by how challenged kind of humanity was in a way in terms of this, there's like a baseline state, obviously, that we're all familiar with of, anger, lust, greed, them, us, self-serving nature of humans. And then I suppose I was fascinated. How does that happen? Like, how do you have a Holocaust or apartheid or a Ukraine or an invasion of this kind at this time? How does that happen? How's that possible? Or the polarization in the United States at the moment. And it fascinated me that there's something amiss in terms of our understanding of the brain and application in intervening on that. And then as having set up this database and having so many key opinion leaders around the world, because I'd had that database share magnanimously with me their wisdoms, it became obvious to me that there was something like the fact that because our emotions our intuitions, our biases, which are very helpful to us. They help us make snap judgments about what is safe. Because they happen in a fifth of a second, and we've measured that, and we know we're one of the first labs in the world to measure that, it means that we are driven by mechanisms, non-conscious mechanisms, in a fifth of a second. And then at about half a second, we feel the consequences of those emotions in our feelings, our heart rate, our sweat. And it surprised me that gap between understanding our emotions and our rational thinking has not been well reconciled, and that potentially is one of the big problems with being able to be so easily hijacked in so many ways with respect to fear. So that was part of I felt, at 70, I'm going to just start to say it a little more simply. This is a simple book. It's a distillation essentially of three things: knowing the brain, doing, making new habits, and a little touch of about integrative wisdom. And as just the takeaways, I suppose, Crystal, and there's much less science than in my other books. It's about the distillation. For example, that the takeaway from chapter 1 is that until you align your non-conscious emotion and your conscious rational thinking, you are walking around in the dark. And that is the first takeaway. The second was the doing. That so much of the biggest gap is between knowing and doing, as you and I have discussed hundreds of times now. But what I saw from the literature, from 40 years of research into habits, is that without a plan, as Ben Franklin said, if you do not have a plan, you are planning to fail. And nowhere is that more prescient than in habits. Now, of course, there are these wonderful books on habits, behaviorally focused, like Atomic Habits, James Clear and BJ Fogg. Beautiful, wonderful, helpful books. I suppose, like everything else in the approach to the brain sort of adds the insight into how does that work exactly, and how does that help us make it sticky and plausible, but more believable and more likely that you can nudge people to do it in a way that they'll do it. Why? Because they'll feel a quicker benefit and they'll see it stick. Because the closer you are to the mechanism, the more likely you can impact its effects. So my habit plan is just a distillation of all these wonderful other researchers across the whole landscape of habits, just a very large dose as well of this emotion, rational neuroscience, the knowing and the routine and the small steps and the prompts and actions and rewards and how you transfer it into your daily life. But ultimately, Crystal, it's the how of starting to be more granular about this, getting across this gap of knowing to doing. How do you help people take the steps without confusing them? The hard work needs to be done by the integrationists and the scientists, and literally hundreds of thousands of them, and doing a wonderful job. And now how do we distill this in a way that people can digest it, do it, see the benefit? It's all about benefit, in the moment benefit. The brain is designed for short-term benefit. If you do not address that, you're done. You're just in the infotainment business, or you can join the sea of should lists. The should lists that we're drowning in. I also am a fellow of the American Institute of Stress, and I love the summary of the editor of the magazine, Dr. Cindy Ackroyd. She says, enough of the should lists. It's fine, but it can also be threatening. They can be stress-provoking. It's about how, and it's better to do one thing where you actually feel that benefit and get some self-empowerment from it, and then build from that. So that's really it. And of course, I'll just
actually, Evian, can I stop you for a second, because I want to double click on that. One of the things that in our work that you've done so well and helped, and it's amazing when we really get into the right space of essence. You say that a lot. I just want to double click on that. This isn't simple. This isn't simplistic, but you've really boiled this down to the essence of what it means to understand the mechanism of the brain, awareness leading to new choice, and then this simple recipe to bring awareness to action. And that's so many people struggle with that. I want to do this extra thing, or I want to have this new habit. I'm not really sure how to bring it into my life. And I want to stay there for just a moment, because you've done such a nice job of boiling down the essence to what is simple without being simplistic. And I really would love for you to talk about your recipe for a moment on how to bring awareness to action. I also love when you talk about the brain and the mechanism, because I work, of course, with leaders in the innovation space and in kind of a corporate setting, and we walk around all day long on autopilot. And exactly. Letting our emotions and our fears and all of our non-conscious triggers create the climate. We bring the weather as leaders, and we're creating a climate that's unintentional. And as soon as people kind of fall back and realize and kind of look at it from the outside, we're like, oh, that's what's been going on. And an understanding of the brain helps them do that. And I think some of us will shy away from that because it's too scientific. Does that make sense?
That's so spot on.
Essence, like so simple that easy to grasp. But I just want to pause on that for just a minute.
Thank you. Look, as usual, you always put your finger on the pulse of the pulse. So let me try my best to answer that quickly without, and we'll deepen this, of course, when we go through our podcast together on this. But that is such a great question. So what I like about what is the essence of that, why it's the essence of the essence, is that, especially if you take leaders, which is what you mainly deal with, and we mainly deal with one in our course together, but essentially they do bring the climate. But I've dealt with so many leaders and heads of not just companies, but sports teams and stuff, and I often ask them, how many people does it take to kill the culture and the environment at your highest level? And within a minute, they say, second even, they say one. And I go, have you ever thought about how that's possible? That one extremely negative person can create such a contagious vibe.
Fantastic.
And it's because our brains are so attuned to risk, because it's about, safety. And so when you have an extreme negative person who's a catastrophizer, they're usually smart. They're analysts or something like that, which is great for analysis, but it's like an analyst bringing it home into their relationship. But when they bring it into work, beyond just the analysis that they're doing, they put everybody on exactly the opposite of our course, on a safety first, fight, flight, threat brain state. And so people, do not want to be confrontational and challenge, because they're usually smart people who can go, whatever idea you have, they'll go, before you've even finished the sentence, they'll go, but I'm concerned, and they'll fold their arms. And you basically can all go home, because everybody's now being hijacked into a premature, limited thinking state. And then everybody's in that rational mode of trying to sort of fix the square peg into the round hole. So there are two examples that I'll share with you quickly in terms of how do we circuit break. Oh, the other thing about that is that's really interesting is that leaders also sometimes are they don't really admit how much of their job, very difficult jobs, are kind of a little bit manipulative. They often don't come with the right intention, because they come in and they all too easily walk the walk and talk the talk. But when you look at what they're actually doing, it doesn't have the sort of depth of integrity sometimes that they pretended that they'd have. So there's a mismatch between the intention, which is self-serving, and their action. And that's very tricky too. And it's hard for leaders who are, a little bit over-contrived to deal with that and to challenge that confirmation bias themselves. So here's two examples of how you and I have been looking to circuit break that. The first is that when you get close to a deep mechanism, you can start thinking more effectively about how to apply it in your own life and to teams. So my two quick examples, the one is Herbert Benson, the wonderful cardiologist from Harvard, who demystified meditation. He basically, to cut a long story short, and it's more detailed in the book, he went to the Himalayas to study monks meditating because he wanted to connect the brain-body connection. And Harvard were initially resistant, and because they said brain-body connection, like seriously, this is a long time ago. But to cut a long story short, he basically found incredible evidence of the power of slow breath during meditation. And of course, all of that is true, and there are great virtues to meditation, of course. But what he then discovered is the real discovery, and that is repetition of any stimulus, breath, movement in Tai Chi yoga, sound like we do with brain music labs in giving the sound in Total Brain and in the tools we'll be using to induce an entrainment state in the brain that is more calm and more flexible and is not in that limited possibility fight-flight state. So he deconstructed the fact that, yes, meditation from a spiritual point of view with that association is powerful, but it's not the spiritual association. That's an additional benefit. It's the repetition. So if you're secular, so if you're religious and you want to think, your sound can be, Hail Mary, and you can think of us, or if you're Eastern, you could think about the power of now and the spiritual light and universal integration, and that is incredibly powerful. And I know many people have had those transformations and they love it and it guides their life. But if you're secular and you want to focus more on the evidence-based interconnection in the world through the deeper science insights, you don't need a spiritual association. You can just have a pragmatic association of slow breathing, and he just even saying one word as you breathe out, like now. Right. Or even one, which is what he started doing. Just say the word one. And the evidence was the same, that most of the benefit was just in the repetition of a stimulus. And then if you want to add on whatever you want to add on, that's great. So what they did is it deconstructed, demystified, and provided a universal mechanism to getting into the moment quickly by repeating stimuli, mantras, focus on a circle, slow breathing, the right quick music. So that was one example, I think, Crystal, of really getting into this flexibility thinking brain state. Before we come to the flexibility thinking, I'll just give you one other example, another principle, universal principle one, and that is resonant breathing, which of course we do in the course as well. And what that is, when I discovered this as I switched from my heart life, research life to the brain, that it was funny though, that the breathing at 6 breaths a minute, it turns out, is an incredibly deep physiology to switch off the stress and switch on the flexibility state, the flow state, the zone, the calm, flexible, vagus state. The words don't matter. The physiology is what's important.
Yeah, and there's a few things. There's so much there, as always. There's in terms of, you have so much depth and integration of wisdom and knowledge. It's amazing. A few things I can't not mention, as you talked about why this book, why now. I can't not mention your connection to Total Brain and the chief medical officer there and where the world is at. And so you mentioned the polarization, and but we haven't mentioned the mental state of the world and how staggering the stats are over the last year and a half as we're coming out of COVID. It doesn't matter if you're an analyst. Every leader that I meet, every leader that I coach is in this space, and they're not really sure why, but they're seeing resignations, they're seeing mental health issues, they're seeing a lack of focus, they're seeing a lack of purpose. There's so much going on in the world right now. When we saw the stats, the anxiety at an all-time high and lack of focus down significantly since the pre-COVID. I'd love to hear you talk about that, because I feel like not the doom and gloom, but like we aren't meeting people at an open and flexible state. Most of the world isn't there right now, no matter what you are, right? And so what we are offering as we work together through some of this and what you're offering in your book is a simple and practical recipe. And as you talk about meditation, I also need to disconnect. Some leaders feel like it's just too hard. It takes too long to get really good at meditation. And what you're offering with resonant breathing, and it has really impacted how I think about my day, how I block my calendar, the neurotunes that you offer in Total Brain versus the resonant breathing. 3 seconds, we can kind of intercept a hijack, right? 30 seconds. And in 3 minutes, we can interflow. And then ongoing, we talk about the long term and how do you set up for that? We say in the moment and in the long run. So I'd love to hear you talk about that.
Yeah.
But I can't connect the dot back.
No, that's so good.
And mental health. And mental health crisis is one thing. What we have not heard enough about is the brain state associated to that crisis. Does that make sense? And I'd love to hear you talk about that for a minute.
So what we did was we used that the assessment from the standardized international database that I set up. We used that in Total Brain. It's a 20-minute assessment, and we use it around the country in our 40 major corporates, and there are about 1.5 million people who've used Total Brain. So what we did is we worked with the National Association of HR people. It's about the top Fortune 500 companies, the heads of HR. They helped with use Total Brain. They sort of collaborated with us in reporting every month throughout COVID of how the mental health screen that we use and the cognition, including emotion and focus, how they changed. And it was amazing how the data in the brain and mental health screen mirrored the level of uncertainty during COVID. And it was such a great example to be presenting to these people every month, these literally people who are like at the belly of the beast of the biggest companies in the world, basically, and how smart they were in how the destigmatization of mental health deepened, because of the evidence and because of the shock of COVID. And then, however, the discussion started to move more and more towards the so what? Like, what do we do about this? It's one thing to destigmatize mental health, and that has definitely begun. But it's another thing for people to really take ownership of providing tools that can help people in the moment. And so the spectrum of tools, for example, that we have in Total Brain is to allow people to circuit break as quickly as possible in the moment, and then have a continuum of, if you've only got 3 breaths and you're sitting in a meeting, you need to have your brain rewired up to trained so that when you do those 3 breaths at 6 breaths per minute, they connect to a network in your brain that does switch you off. You can't just sit there and start doing that in the middle of the meeting. You've got to be trained. It's like a peak performer. They do the work, and then on the field in game time, they can activate it very quickly. Same idea, same principles, whether it's resonant breathing or where even if it's neurotunes, it can help you get into that mindset. Positive affirmations, body language, massive way to change. Even literally, as we're sitting now, just gently pulled our shoulders back, we would change our brain state for real. Now, all of this nudging is in the service of brain state of presence. And then even strategies like through CBT, thought tamer it's called, through CBT Light, is what happens if you and I are talking now and we have a negative thought. It's intervening. We're in a meeting at a company and something's happening and we suddenly found ourselves challenged. How do we put it into better context in real time? So all of these tools, Crystal, I think can be trained thoughtfully, but with brain basis in mind, to work on different time scales and then fitted into a person's actual life and sort of all like start simulating real situations where they can be hijacked and how they would operate in real time. I love meditation, but in real time is very different to meditating for 20 minutes in the morning. That will put you into a good mental state and has great virtues, but it's like top down, bottom up. The brain rewires with massive granularity and specificity and context. It's got to be for that situation. So it's not that hard to bring those pieces together, as long as you do a little bit of training with a targeted plan and super focused.
We don't talk about that enough. I thank you for doing that. I just wanted to hear you talk about it. We talk about mental health as a strategy. I hear that a lot. And my mental health is on our strategy list now. But I don't hear enough about the brain-based rewiring and the effect that has not just on mental health, which is, and I love the destigmatization of mental health. This is incredibly important. The reason I'm so passionate about this, I usually come at it from leaders and teams trying to get work done. And this mental state standing in the way, and all of the subconscious and all the narratives and all the things that you mentioned earlier that are kind of getting in the way of just natural collaboration. And you mentioned sometimes our intent isn't the best, but you know what? Sometimes the intent is absolutely pure. But the non-conscious still gets in the way of what is intended, which is what comes out, right? So sometimes it's just like it's a rock in the river, if you will. And so I really wanted to hear you talk about that. So thank you. So tell us a little bit. So you had back to our track. And then as we always do, we take these side roads, which are amazing.
No, I love it. And just to end off with the integrative wisdom, and of course I make it very clear, Crystal, in the book that I have no illusions or delusions about my own level of integrative wisdom. But if we look at everybody is on a journey, a brain journey, whether they like it or not, from birth till death. It's just a matter of where you would choose to be. Do you want to be in the baseline state, or do you have the opportunity? And that wisdom can come from many places. It doesn't matter. Find wisdoms wherever you find them. But there is a kind of integrative wisdom, and it includes emotion and rational thinking, and knowledge and experience and context. But I want to say also, Crystal, that my great joy to end off, that is in the book, of course, in addition to these takeaways from each chapter that I've just summarized, is the course that we've done on the science of peak performance and possibility thinking. And it does pivot around creativity and this emotional, intuitive, and rational convergence, the divergent and convergent thinking. But what has been a joy for me is that, and I know you and I sound a little extreme, I suppose, when we say creativity is the highest form of thinking. Well, I believe it. I know you do, but it sounds a little kind of like a little pretentious, but I believe it. It's like, because it's the possibility thinking. It is the biggest bandwidth of thinking so that you can look for the best possibility fits. And I know that's what you do for a living with some of the most powerful people in the world. And it's to increase their bandwidth, to find solutions that are not limited based on their conditioned sort of selves. So that you're in the expanding the bandwidth business from what I've seen, and you're just breathtaking at it. But I do say I've been educated by you so deeply about, the differences between creativity and possibility thinking and possibility leadership and innovation. And I wonder how you feel you've connected those dots from a brain point of view. I mean, this particular slide just happens to have many brain models of this, which is sort of covered in the book. But from your point of view, how have you found that the brain story adds to clarify that creativity, possibility thinking, possibility leadership, and innovation?
Sure. Yeah. So it's been a very personal journey for me. I was a former art student, turned business, and denied my creative roots. And then I came full circle around to the innovation space, and now in kind of this, what I like to call possibility leadership. And so I think about it differently. You and I've had many conversations around this. When I think of creativity, I think of originality and kind of tapping into your intuition and seeing new insight. So some people would call that innovation thought, right? When we first launched WhatBox Innovation Partners, we branded heavily on the innovation space. And that might have been, look, we were new and it was a buzzword. And then I realized how deeply it was misunderstood. And do you know what? And then I also realized there was bigger opportunity and bigger need here in the world. And so we've leaned back out of the innovation, not to say that we don't do that work, but when we talk about creativity and possibility thinking and the distinction between the two, I think of creativity can be for the purpose of beauty. And that's it. Right? It's new, it's novel, and it's deeply created. It's being a creator, but it doesn't necessarily make it useful always. When I think of possibility thinking, I take it up a level of what we do as we've explored this deeply, right? When we talked about the brain-based. So your creativity is for your originality and novelty, but could be just for beauty. When you bring in possibility thinking, it is the interplay between your intuition and your rational. You are taking new insight and you're putting that into action and context to find possibilities. And I don't necessarily want to index too much on optimism and that everything has to be beautiful. Sometimes we're navigating big risks and we're looking at possibilities, and that can be applied to your life, to your leadership, to your team, to your enterprise, to your strategy, and to innovation, right? So then we talk about possibility leadership, and that comes from a very brain-based state of creating the climate, using the understanding of the brain of creating the climate for others so they too can tap into new insight and awareness and act on that and turn that into different possibilities, different avenues that we've not necessarily traveled before. And that's, I think, where we get stuck when you're talking about the mental health, and people kind of come at this from a locked state, and all we can either do is find incremental things to do, or we can see all the ways that something might go wrong, and we stew on the risk. What we don't do enough is generate divergent thinking and then possibilities to act on that, and then iterate that in a world. So then apply that to, so I think creativity, and then I think possibility thinking leading to possibility leadership, which is then applying that to your climate and helping others see that same possibility or other possibilities, leveraging neurodiversity, leveraging collaboration, leveraging all the things that we need to do in the world, but we don't have the skills always to do it, or we let all the stuff get in the way. And then that leads to innovation culture. And the innovation piece, the nuance there for me that I always get kind of sticky on, is for me, innovation is creating new value for stakeholders and for customers, right? Customers and stakeholders, whoever they are, but it's creating new value in the world that is beyond yourself, whereas possibility thinking could just be possibilities for your life. And I think of innovation as a little bit broader in terms of the business context around that. And that can be incremental, it can be breakthrough, it can be revolutionary, it can be scale it however you want to think about it. But you can't get there without possibility thinking. and you can't get there without an understanding of the brain. And I see too much people will say innovate more, do more with less, get creative, think about new solutions that we've not, and yet we're not acknowledging and connecting the dot with the mental state of the world, where we're meeting people, what capacities they have, and even the ability to collaborate effectively in a diverse setting. So it's great to have diversity if you know how to leverage it. And so we do a lot of brain-based, as you know, whole brain thinking and collaboration, what that looks like, and offer, even in the course that we've done, Evian offer, we call it from problem to possible. So understanding the brain, understanding bias, how do you then apply that in the moment, in the long run? And then what does that look like in a collaboration setting? What does it look like in a problem-solving setting? And then taking it a step further, and we apply from knowing to doing, which thank you came from your recipe, back to the book of knowing to doing. How do you take all of that and bring it into your life? And it usually falls down there because people don't understand the brain state and how to connect that to new habit and to make that stick, to your point you said earlier, stickiness, right? So that's how I think about it. I don't necessarily think I'm right. I think I think you and I have explored this from
I know.
I've reckoned it, if you will, or reconciled it in my mind and made sense of it through our work together. Hopefully that.
Wonderful. No, I don't think you're right. I know you're right. So I know that there is a book percolating, because I know it, that is going to be whatever it's going to be called. I'm pretty sure it's going to be something like The Brain and Possibility Thinking. And I look forward to interviewing you, not on your 70th birthday, but within a couple of months on that one, because it's absolutely timely. Yeah.
I hope so. And it wouldn't, to be honest, none of that clarity would have come without our collaboration and bringing it back to the brain state and really understanding what that means. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you, Crystal. It's just been such a wonderful journey. But I have to say that it's been the interface, everything you've mentioned, from creativity to innovation, from innovation to see what we've done with Total Brain, but in creativity, my art life, and I suppose the last thing I'll share with you on this weird 70th day of life reckoning, is that it has surprised me. One of the other patterns that old age has done for me, in addition to sort of seeing these sort of obvious signals, like don't work with people you're not aligned with, obvious things like that I just took me forever to learn. Like, what was I thinking? I look back, I go, I literally lose my breath. But the other positive part of the age is that some of the patterns, for example, the pattern between my art and my work life in Total Brain, and the art had this journey from the Big Bang to it's abstract expressionism, so it made us be. And when I had 2 exhibitions in New York, people said to me, "Can you explain that painting to me?" And I said, "No, actually." I said, "But you're a brain scientist; you've got to be able to." But I said, "It's abstract expressionism," so I tried not to. But over time, Crystal, I realised that, and especially now, I look back at that book that Colton has also helped birth on my art and the brain book that's now today, and I see that they're actually 2 sides of the same coin. Yeah. The non-conscious intuition and the story in my art is not dissimilar at all to the story of going from the database to dealing with these innovation and trying to apply it in this kind of disciplined way and finding product market fit and simplifying that in a way that's not simplistic. It's weird to me, Crystal, as I look at them a little bit more dispassionately now, and I go, the non-conscious brain really is its own language, and it speaks to us if we prepare to listen.
We listen. That's exactly right. I'm so glad you mentioned your art book. We hadn't really touched on that, but it's one of the first things that stood out to me when I met you was that you were an artist and a scientist. That doesn't happen. That duality doesn't happen very often. And I love it. I love every minute of it. And I love your book. I hope you're going to put it on the link. I'm going to ask you in a minute how people can get access to some of these things. But I love your book. I sat down with my family. I have 2 kids, and as you know, and I had my boys go through it, and you inspired him to do some art after that. And then it inspired me actually as we're starting to roll out this course together. One of the things that I've really been sitting with lately and trying on with some clients, and as well as one of the events we had recently, was this.
Oh my goodness, you sent me those pictures that those executives painted, and I went, oh my goodness, forget the science of peak performance and possibility thinking. Let's run an art course.
I'm ready. Let's do it. Yeah.
The executives from that last
let's do it.
Last retreat you did were like staggering what they painted.
So I'll explain it just for our listeners, but it was amazing. You primed that, right? A conversation with you one Friday. We hadn't planned it, and then we kind of made a game time decision and decided to do it. And now I'm going to do it every single time we have this course, and you and I will combine them, and over time we'll launch a nonprofit big.
Yeah, and I loved it. And you just told them to paint their possibility thinking, right?
No, actually, it was flow. So we talked. So what we did, we went through the brain science of possibility thinking. We shared your book and the video around that, which was an amazing primer. And we talked about the fact that there are 2 languages, really. We have this language that we live in, which is words and numbers and verbal, right? And then we have this non-conscious language of feelings and visuals and intuition and emotions. And it does talk to us, but we live in the other side all the time, but it almost gets overshadowed. And so we did not allow any words. But we did ask, we talked about flow, we talked about the science of flow, and then we asked the executive team to paint flow, which is amazing. And it was amazing, not just what came out of it in the artwork, but it was more amazing to hear each leader talk about what it meant to them and how much deeper that conversation went. So, and we talk about that a lot when we talk about strategy and the importance of visualizing your strategy and not just putting words on a page, but bringing it to life to people through narratives and through emotions and through visuals. But that exercise was powerful. And I'm glad you mentioned your art. So I hope you're sharing that at the end.
Well, yeah. So basically, so the book can be got off Amazon as usual. It'll be up probably tomorrow by latest Friday, but my site, dreviangordon.com, is a sort of whoever wants to sort of connect to any of the books, but also the podcast. I think this is going to be deepened, Crystal, by the podcast. I know we've done one already, but this will be now just around the book about and what we've spoken about today on possible, the science of peak performance and possibility thinking. We'll do podcast on that and deepen the kind of specifically and with deeper, more time, the issues we've discussed. So in dreviangordon.com, anybody wants to get access to the podcast or to the books, it's there, but also just on Amazon for The Brain from Knowing to Doing from tomorrow, Friday. And then from a community point of view, we are a very special community between all of us. The top of the 30 people who've most contributed to this deep integration. We all have pretty amazing networks. And so what we're doing, or what I'm doing in the last phase of my life, is to just join instead of the knowing, because I've created many or participated in many communities, but they're usually about the knowing. This is just about the doing. How do we join forces and provide the tools and the products and the deep science that can help connect these dots of integrative wisdom, but in an applied sense, the innovation that incorporates all these things you so elegantly summarized in creativity and possibility leadership and possibility thinking. And so that's that community, and that's another way to keep touch with it and see if you want to participate with specific ideas, as long as they connect it explicitly to either course or the big database or something that somebody in our network is doing, so that it's not just a talk fest, but it's a synergy fest of this. It's just, the world of silos is what we try and, connect the dots. And that's what I'm going to try. And my last hurrah is trying my best to connect those doing dots.
That's amazing. So I will make sure that those links, when we post this on our site and with our network, I'll make sure those links are there.
Thank you.
And I just want to say happy birthday. Congratulations on such great, deep, integrated work. I'm honored for the not just the work you've done with me, but the work you've done in the world, the art you've put into the world, the awareness that you're creating. And it's absolutely stunning. It really is humbling.
Thank you, Crystal. I can assure you the honor is all mine. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Happy birthday, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, Evian.
Thank you. Speak to you soon.